Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to 90.4 Oman FM. This is Arfan Al-Ajmi, and I have with me in the studio Malaak Al-Lawati. She's an Omani marine biologist with a bachelor's in marine vertebrate zoology, and she's joined us here today to discuss Oman's biodiversity and the importance of conserving said biodiversity. Malaak, thank you so much for coming to the station. How are you feeling today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm feeling very great, excited to talk more.
Excited to have you here. And let's start at the very, very beginning of your story. How did your interest in biodiversity and marine life take shape?
Well, thank you for the question. I think my journey really started with being influenced by my family, especially my older sister, who is also in wildlife conservation. When we were young, we had the privilege of living in Australia for 2 years, possibly one of the wildest places in the world. So I think that really drew us into nature. And I don't know if you've heard of Bindi the Jungle Girl.
Is she Steve Irwin's daughter? Yes.
Yes. So she had a TV show. It was for children, and it was all about, nature. And it was such a great way to make us curious about the world around us. But when my parents got me my first camera and binoculars, I stopped looking at the nature. It was transition to observing it in more detail. So I remember watching green bee eaters from outside my window as they learned how to catch bees midair. You could tell like the juveniles or the young ones apart by their short tail. And so they would fly and like do a little dance in the air as they catch a bee. And once they catch it, they have to like hit it against a branch or a surface because bees have stingers. So they need to disarm the bee before they swallow it. And so that was amazing to see.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Speaking of nature, though, you spend a lot of time bird watching and diving. So when you're out there, does your scientific background change your experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think my scientific background allows me to appreciate nature more, and look at it with more admiration.
Can I ask how?
Yeah. So, for example, when I go diving and I see first of all, it feels like I'm stepping into someone else's living room. They're all going about their daily lives. And you just see the fish like chasing each other. You see the sort of behavior between different species, and that just makes me question, what's going on there. But then also, like when I see coral reefs, you can see a very clear contrast between healthy reefs and destroyed reefs that are just the corals are fully fragmented and covered with algae, and there's no life there. So having that scientific background, knowing that reefs take like 10, 20, 50 years to grow into what we see today, I can see more that how like by destroying the reef accidentally by kicking it or anchoring in it, it might just be one moment, but it's actually destroying like decades worth of growth in the reef.
Well, speaking of nature, a lot of people, when they think of Oman, they think of two things: deserts and mountains. From your perspective, could you further elaborate on just what does our biodiversity look like, and what's a part of our biodiversity that, in your opinion, does not give the attention that it deserves?
Yeah, so it's true that 80% of Oman is desert, and that is beautiful also. But if you just look a little bit beyond that, you'll see that Oman sits at the intersection of three different bodies of water. We have the Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Oman Sea. So the ocean is actually a big part of biodiversity. And our maritime history also is highly connected to that. And I think marine life, because it's often so invisible to us, it's hidden under the water, it might not be given more attention. So, for example, we have one of the most unique population of humpback whales in the world. We have the Arabian Sea humpback whale. It's truly Omani. It doesn't migrate, which is very odd compared to other whales. And it also has its own unique song. So no other humpback whale will sing the way that the Arabian Sea humpback whale does. And less than 100 of them are left. So they're critically endangered, but they're not getting enough light. They're not getting enough attention and care.
You spoke recently about Bur al-Hikman. So what makes that area and wetlands overall so special?
Yeah. So Bur al-Hikman is a type of wetland, and wetlands are neither land nor sea. They're somewhere in between. And wetlands are like globally important because they kind of serve as supermarkets for biodiversity. And
What do you mean by supermarkets for biodiversity?
yeah, so when you see Bar al-Hikman, you might see like a large area of just mud, and it might seem not productive to you, but actually within that mud, there lives all kinds of marine life, like crabs, small crustaceans, shells, snails, and all of this is the entire ground is basically a buffet of food for birds. So that's what makes Bar al-Hikman so important, and wetlands in general. And the thing about Bar al-Hikman is that it's one of the few pristine areas left in the world, even though there is a lot of plastic pollution there, and it is under threat from tourism and urbanization. But it supports 500,000 wintering birds every year. So birds take these long migrations, searching for food and areas to lay their eggs. And these migrations can be quite long, can be over quite a few number of days and weeks, and very long distances. So imagine if you are driving like a very long way, you need a station to refuel, to rest, to have some food. And that's exactly what Bar al-Hikman is. It's an important link in this entire chain of bird migration routes. So if we lose Bar al-Hikman, we're not just losing an area, we're losing an important link that connects everything together. Yeah.
So, despite its importance, there are a lot of threats that Bar al-Hikman is facing currently. It's under pressure. From what you've seen, what are the biggest threats facing it right now?
Yeah, so Bar al-Hikman is under threat from expansion. So human expansion, human activity. It's, it's known as the Maldives of Oman, which means there's going to be a lot of tourism. There already is. And that just means more human disturbance, and more construction, more development. And so I think that is a near threat to Bar al-Hikman because what makes it so important and useful is the lack of human activity. So the birds and the wildlife can enjoy that without being disturbed. So we need to be very careful when we move forward because we need to protect Bar al-Hikman.
Now, conservation can sometimes feel like a big, distant concept, right? So what are some real practical things, whether on a community or a national level, that can actually help?
Yeah, so I think for me as well, conservation does seem like a big, distant thing sometimes, and it seems too big and complex. But essentially, conservation is just caring and protecting for something, not just for today, but for tomorrow. And whenever I think about this, I think of Dr. Jane Goodall, when she said that, whether you like it or not, you're going to make a difference every single day. And it's up to you to decide what kind of difference and what kind of impact you have. So I think we can do so much more in our micro choices and the choices we take on a daily basis. Like, for example, deciding where you throw your rubbish, being more aware of that, not wasting food, boycotting like brands that are unethical. These are small micro decisions and micro habits that will lead to a larger change in the community. And so by doing that, you're really doing conservation. And you don't need to have like a PhD or a bachelor's in the environment. You can contribute to citizen science, which is basically, taking photos of the nature that you see, making observations, keeping records, because that's basically data. That's being a scientist, really.
And I want to now pivot the interview over to Nature Lab OM. So you created Nature Lab OM. Am I pronouncing that correctly, by the way?
Yeah.
Yep. I'd like to now pivot the interview over to Nature Lab OM. So you created Nature Lab OM to make research more accessible. How did that idea start, and what's the gap that you're hoping to fill?
Yeah, so Nature Lab really started, it all comes back to Bad al-Hikman because that was a very life-changing experience for me. It made me realize that, hey, this amazing ecosystem exists in Oman that not a lot of people know about, and it's under threat. So why are we not talking about it? And that was one thing that I realized I could do, which was talk about biodiversity and explain to people its importance and break down these concepts. Because I think like a community that is well educated and understand their environment will care for it naturally and want to protect it.
And of course, science can also feel intimidating to people who are not in the scientific community. How do you break down complex research to make it more relatable?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm still working on. I think Nature Lab is like still so young, so I'm actually learning more, what kind of approach to take when I'm explaining things. But I think one great tool is just to use storytelling and to use analogies and metaphors that bring science closer to people and make it more relevant.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about something called upwelling in Oman. So we have one of the largest upwelling systems in the world. And this upwelling is basically like an engine. It's like a pump. So it pumps colder, deeper water up to the surface to replace water that's being driven offshore by the winds. And that's what makes the area so productive. So I think by comparing, the upwelling to a pump, which essentially it is, I think it makes it more accessible to people. Science is not just numbers and figures and facts in a textbook. It's really a way of looking at the world and understanding it logically.
And speaking of understanding it, let's pivot now over to any younger listeners who might be tuning in right now in Oman. And they might love nature and they want to get involved, but they have absolutely no idea how to get involved, where to begin. What would you tell them? Where can they start?
I think you can start like exactly where you are. Like if you love nature, just continue loving nature, continue observing, keeping your mind open, be curious, ask questions. If you see something interesting, look it up. Everything is accessible to you online and talk about it. Talk to your friends, obsess about it. It's fine. It's cool. And I think right now there are a lot of youth groups as well that are focused on sustainability and climate change. So join one of those groups, attend these workshops, attend these field trips. Just go out there, go explore nature.
And looking ahead, how do you feel about the future of Oman's ecosystem? Do you feel hopeful, more concerned, and why?
So I feel a bit of both. I feel concerned because I think there are a lot of things happening in Oman that we don't know about, that we don't hear about, that can have a negative impact on the environment. And even the things and the issues that we do know about, like overfishing, for example, people have spoken about it. There's data, the science is there, but it almost feels like we're not listening to it. And that's where my uncertainty comes from. But the hope comes from the community because when I talk to people, I can see that, they lit up. They have a desire to connect to nature. They have a desire to learn. Even though that curiosity is sometimes mixed with a little bit of fear from the ocean, they still want it. And that's where a lot of my hope comes from because, we can only make a change if we do it together.
Beautifully said. And one final question. The floor is yours. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything you want to tell our listeners?
So I guess the last thing is just to, say thank you, first of all, for this opportunity. And again, I would just emphasize to people to be curious and to ask questions, And yeah, I guess you can follow Nature Lab if you want to learn more about biodiversity. And thank you.
Malaak, thank you so very much for coming in today. It was truly a pleasure speaking with you. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was Malaak Al-Lawati, an Omani marine biologist on 90.4 Oman FM. We spoke about Oman's biodiversity and the need to preserve and conserve it. This is Arfan Al-Ajmi, and let's all do our part in helping maintaining the beauty that surrounds us.